All right, hi guys. So in our last video, we talked about how Dickens is really developing this theme that only through sacrifice is resurrection possible. And we see it through Sidney Carton at the end of the novel, in that he's able to resurrect Charles Darnay through his sacrifice. And we also talked about how he's able to resurrect himself through his sacrifice. Now what we're going to talk about is how he's able to resurrect other people through his sacrifice. Specifically, what I want to talk about now is the Manette family, right? Lucy, little Lucy, Dr. Manette, and the rest of the family who's traveling with them. And he does this by saving them from denunciation and execution. So denunciation was this really nasty law that was put in place in France under Robespierre that led to the Reign of Terror. And this was this law where everyday common citizens were able to denounce or speak out against others who they claimed were enemies to the Republic. And what started as a way to ensure public safety and the safety of the Republic turned into something that was really just about vengeance, hatred, petty grievances, where neighbors were ratting out neighbors for little to no reason. And people were going to the guillotine, as we see in the last chapter we talked about, 52, in these astounding numbers every single day. So Dickens picks this up with Madame Defarge. On page 342, we find out Sidney Carton visits the wine shop in order to have himself be seen so that they don't suspect anything. He wants the Defarges to know that there's someone in Paris who looks like Charles Darnay. So they're not suspicious when a man who looks like Charles Darnay leaves France. So he specifically goes to the wine shop to be seen by the Defarges. And while he's there, he pretends like he doesn't speak French, and he overhears them talking about their plan. And the plan is to denounce Lucy. And they're going to do it through the wood sawyer. So remember, the wood sawyer was our former mender of roads, the man who lived in the country he was a tenant of the Marquis Evermond. And he's going to tell the jury that he saw Lucy making signs and signals to prisoners. So remember, every day for over a year, Lucy would go and stand right outside the prison, La Force, where Darnay was kept, for multiple hours, in the hopes that he could see her. And every now and then she would kiss her lips to her hand and raise her hand up or do other things to show Darnay that she was there and she loved him. And this happened to be right outside the shop of the wood sawyer, former mender of roads. And he's going to say that her doing that was her making signs and signals to the prisoner, plots against the Republic. And so because of this, she's going to be charged with prison plots, and it will involve her life and perhaps her child's. So remember, Lucy would often take little Lucy with her, and perhaps her father. So even her father was with her sometimes, for both have been seen with her at that place. So Madame Defarge isn't okay with just the life of Charles Darnay, because to her, the Evermond family also involves now Lucy and little Lucy, and Dr. Manette is tied in with them. And if it means that Dr. Manette has to be sent to the guillotine in order for her to exterminate the chateau and all the race, then so be it. And so Carton comes up with this plan. On 342 and 343, he involves Mr. Lorry in his escape plan for them to get out of Paris. And this is in chapter 12, where he outlines, this is his plan for them to escape. And during this escape, we see Dickens doing something really interesting. His narration completely changes in chapter 1352 at the very end. And it has a powerful effect on the reader. One of the ways it changes is it switches to first person. So throughout the entire novel, Dickens had been using third person omniscient narration, using they. But he switches for this very short period of time to a first person limited narration. Suddenly it's we. We here are not pursued. We are pursued by nothing. He's no longer using they. Forward, my postilions, right? He has switched here to a first person narration, and it has a powerful effect on us. It feels like we, the reader, are in the carriage racing out of France with them. It really adds a lot of tension and suspense, and it makes us feel this urge, this desire to get out, because it's like we're there with them in the carriage, urging them on, worried at every stop that someone is going to catch them and force them back. He also changes his narration because it becomes very fast-paced. This is similar to what he did with Storming of the Bastille. And writers often do this by creating very short, choppy sentences with lots of dashes and exclamation. So we've got some examples here of what he's doing. Very short sentence. One can depart, citizen. Forward, my postilion. A good journey. Very short sentence. The road is clear, my dearest. So far we are not pursued. And this is even more drastic for Dickens because so many of his other sentences are so long and involved. So to have this section with these really short, choppy sentences truly does have an impact and create tension, suspense, speed, and make us feel this need to get out as quickly as possible. Okay, so Madame Defarge is going to denounce the family. And this raises the question, why is she so set against the Evrémonde family? And we find out in chapter 13, page 339, when Sidney Carton is in the wine shop overhearing them on page 339. Let's turn there together because this is such a revelation. Again, this great theme of mystery, that we never truly know everything about a person. We can always be shocked and surprised. This comes out in this chapter on page 339 when we find out the very top of the page, I communicate to him that secret. I smite this bosom with these two hands as I smite it now, and I tell him, Defarge, I was brought up among the fishermen of the seashore, and that peasant family so injured by the two Evrémonde brothers, as that Bastille paper describes, is my family. Defarge, that sister of the mortally wounded boy upon the ground, was my sister. That husband was my sister's husband. That unborn child was their child. That brother was my brother. That father was my father. Those dead are my dead. And that summons to answer for those things descends to me. So we have this great revelation here that she is the sister. She is the sister of the family that was abused by the Evrémondes. So in this case, the missing sister is resurrected. Again, there we see that theme, when Madame Defarge's true identity is revealed. So remember, the last action of the peasant woman's brother before he dies on page 325 was to curse the Marquis and all the Evrémonde family, drawing a cross in the air with his blood. And he specifically says, to the last of your bad race. So Madame Defarge sees it as her responsibility to avenge her family, right? She says, those dead are my dead. The summons falls to me. She sees that it is her responsibility to see this done, to avenge her family. And so on page 339, she tells her husband, tell wind and fire where to stop, not me. She is this destructive force of nature who cannot be turned aside. And this is very reminiscent of Book 2, when she compares the revolution to lightning and earthquake. She is a force of nature, and she cannot be stopped. She feels compelled to see vengeance done. And she cannot stop until all are dead, to the last of your bad race, even if it means sending innocent Lucy and little Lucy to the guillotine. She no longer feels pity, love, or mercy. She can only see vengeance and hate. We see this definitely in chapter 12 on 338. So we were on 339 before. Let's look at the page right before, 338, where she's speaking with her husband, the Vengeance, and the Jacques. Her husband says about halfway down the page, I say stop there. So Monsieur Defarge, he wants to be done. with just Charles Darnay's death. But she can't. She can't find pity. She can't find forgiveness. She can't feel love or mercy. She needs to see to the last of your bad race this family wiped out. And Dickens elaborates on this in chapter 14. Everyone turn to page 359. Really powerful passage. And I know for your essay, one of your options is to write about characters and their actions and their motivations. And Madame Defarge is such an intriguing character who goes so far, but at the same time, we can't help but feel some level of empathy for her, of sympathy, of understanding for why she is driven to this extreme. And Dickens highlights this on page 359, the top of the page. He says, but there was not one among them more to be dreaded than this ruthless woman. So he's talking here about Madame Defarge. Now taking her way along the street, of a strong and fearless character, of shrewd sense and readiness, of great determination, of that kind of beauty, which not only seems to impart to its possessor firmness and animosity, but to strike into others an instinctive recognition of those qualities. The troubled time would have heaved her up under any circumstance, but imbued from her childhood with a brooding sense of wrong and an inveterate hatred of a class, opportunity had developed her into a tigress. She was absolutely without pity. If she had ever had the virtue in her, it had quite gone out of her. It was nothing to her that an innocent man was to die for the sins of his forefathers. She saw not him, but them. It was nothing to her that his wife was to be made a widow and his daughter an orphan. That was insufficient punishment, because they were her natural enemies and her prey, and as such had no right to life. To appeal to her was made hopeless by her having no sense of pity, even for herself. If she had been laid low in the street in any of the many encounters in which she had been engaged, she would not have pitied herself, nor, if she had been ordered to the axe tomorrow, would she have gone to it with any softer feeling than a fierce desire to change places with the man who had sent her there. Such a heart Madame Defarge carried under her rough robe. So Dickens here is making it clear, not only is she absolutely without pity, but she wasn't born this way. She was transformed into this by the abusive and terrible circumstances in France. If she had ever had such virtue in her, it had been quite gone out of her, right? Opportunity had developed her into a tigress. She had been imbued from her childhood with a brooding sense of wrong. Even though Madame Defarge is this horrible woman who goes to such hateful extremes, Dickens is showing us that it's not without cause, that she was not born this way. She was created this way by the circumstances.